Cryptozoology is the study of creatures whose existence has yet to be, or else cannot entirely be, proved or disproved by science. Now, for the most part, these creatures are said to be fake or mistaken sightings of other animals. However, there have been reported sightings of a few that have people questioning whether they are in fact real. Now, I should preface by saying that this is all speculative, but there may very well be some evidence to support these theories. Known to exist in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, the Jersey Devil is often described as having hooves, a snake's tail, bat wings, and a head that looks something like a horse. There have been many sightings throughout history of the Jersey Devil, with the cryptid dating all the way back to the 1700s and continuing on until the past decade. It is said that the Jersey Devil often glows and can breathe fire or poison water with its breath. Throughout folklore, it is also known as the Leeds Devil, with local residents tracing its origins to a woman named Mother Leeds, the mistress of a British soldier who was suspected of being a witch. When she gave birth to her 13th child, she cursed it. The baby was born as a hairy creature and soon began terrorizing the town and its people, even eating children. Now, like I said, there have been many sightings throughout history. On July 27, 1937, an unknown animal with red eyes seen by residents of Downingtown, Pennsylvania, was compared to the Jersey Devil by a reporter for the Pennsylvania Bulletin of July 28, 1937. In 1951, a group of Gibbstown, New Jersey boys claimed to have seen a monster matching the devil's description, and claims of a corpse matching the Jersey Devil's description arose in 1957. Now, many choose to ignore the Jersey Devil, with it thought to be an undiscovered species of animal, generally classified as living pre-pterodactyl. Coming in at number 4, we have Yowie. Yowie, also known as Yehu, Yuri, Hairy Man, or Yahoo, is a fanged humanoid creature or great ape featured in Aboriginal mythology along with Australian raptors or Burrinjaw. It is considered to be the Australian Bigfoot and contains many primate-like features, indicating that it is an undiscovered species of great ape. Yowie is described as being one of the most aggressive Sasquatch species and has been reported ripping the heads off of kangaroos and dogs. In the past, it has been described to be around 7 to 9 feet tall, with a large red mouth and talon-like claws, according to Aboriginal legends. It is also noted as having 2 large fang-like canines, which distinguish the Yowie from the other Bigfoot species. There are around 140 placental mammals known to exist in Australia, most belonging to the order Chiroptera and Rodentia. Some cryptozoologists theorize that the Yowie could be some form of bipedal marsupial, such as a descendant of the New Guinea Hulutherium. Coming in at number 3, we have Mongolian death worm. The Mongolian death worm, also known as its native name, Olgoi korakoi, meaning intestine worm, due to its red blood-like color and size, which is the size of an intestine. It has often been described as around 2 to 7 feet long and possesses the ability to spit out a corrosive yellow saliva and generate blasts of electricity. Mongolian nomads believe the giant worm covers its prey with an acidic substance that turns everything a corroded yellow color. Legend has it that as a creature begins to attack, it raises half of its body out of the sand and starts to inflate until it explodes, releasing the lethal poison all over the victim. It is said that the livestock and humans are its main prey, and because Mongolia had been under Soviet control until 1990, there is very little known about the cryptid. Nobody is entirely sure what the worm actually is, with some experts claiming it to be fake due to the Gobi Desert being too hot an area for annelids to survive. Some have suggested it might be a skink, but they are said to have little legs and scaly skin, whereas witness accounts have specified that the worm is limbless and smooth-bodied. In 2005, an expedition from the Center for Fortean Zoology crossed 1,000 miles of the Gobi on the track of the death worm. They concluded it was likely a large unknown type of worm lizard, and the powers that were attributed to it were apocryphal. Coming in at number 2, we have Ahul. The Ahul, or the Athol, is a winged cryptid often portrayed as a giant bat or even a flying primate, depending on the variation. Tales tell of it living in the deepest parts of the jungle of Java and can be found across most of Indonesia. Subspecies can be found on the neighboring islands of New Guinea in the form the ropen, a presumed cousin to the ahul. The ropen aptly translates to demon flying and is also said to be a big bat, or more commonly a pterosaur. It is said to produce a light, possibly to attract fish. The ropen is said to have a long snout, large wings, and a long thin crest. It has a distinct face that has features of both a chimpanzee's and a bat's, large dark eyes, red-skinned wings, large claws on its forearms, and is covered in grey fur. It is also noted estimated as having a wingspan of 18 to 28 feet and is said to be the largest bat known to mankind. Now back to the ahuls. They are said to be covered in a thick brown or black fur much like fruit bats, but unlike bats have long, powerful legs and claws and are supposedly capable of pouncing on and snatching up living prey, including humans. Sightings of these winged beasts are often dismissed simply as mistaken glimpses of owls, eagles, and other large birds of prey that inhabit the rainforests. However, many sources can confirm that the beast does in fact exist, and may even be an isolated and undiscovered species. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Black Shuck. Black Shuck, or Old Shuck, or simply Shuck, is the name given to an unknown creature which is said to roam in East Anglia. It is one of the many ghostly black dogs recorded across the British Isles. The Black Shuck is often recorded as an omen of death, and some occasions a more companionable animal. Although it is classified as a cryptid, there have been various sightings and reports of the animal's appearance throughout the United Kingdom. For centuries throughout England, many have told tales of large black dogs with malevolent flaming eyes are often depicted as red or sometimes green. According to reports, the beast varies in size and stature from that of simply a large dog to being the size of a calf or even a horse. Other accounts report that Black Shuck as floating on a carpet of mist, or even appearing headless. According to folklore, the Shuck haunts East Anglia, primarily coastline, graveyard, side roads, body of water, and dark forest. W.A. Dutt, in his 1901 Highways and Byways in East Anglia, describes the creature, I quote, "He takes the form of a huge black dog and prowls along the dark lanes and lonesome field footpaths where, although his howling makes the hearer's blood run cold, his footfalls make no sound. You may know him at once, should you see him, by his fiery eye. He has but one, and like the Cyclops, is in the middle of his head. But such an encounter might bring you the worst of luck. It is even said that to meet him is to be warned that your death will occur before the end of the year." As I stated before, the Black Shuck has been reported many times, with one of the most notable reports being the appearance at the churches of Bungay and Blyberg in Suffolk. On August 4th, 1957, Black Shuck was said to have burst in through the church doors to a clap of thunder. He ran up to the nave, past a large congregation, killing a man and a boy and causing the church steeple to collapse through the roof. As the dog left, he left scorch marks on the door, which can be seen at the church even to this day.
Number 5. Day trip gone wrong. When in the wilds of Alberta, people are often advised to be aware of the wildlife that might wander into your path and how to deal with it. It is not uncommon for people to see deer, bears, and even the occasional mountain lion. But one creature that they are not warned about in many of the pamphlets is Bigfoot. As this family found out, this is their story as related by their father. There was still some snow in the bush. We were picking dead tamarack and spruce deadfall to take home for making beanpole teepees in our garden. We had our 3 kids with us, aged around 3, 6, and 8 at the time. My wife and I were dragging the dry fall out of the bush and figuring which ones we could work with. After what seemed like a couple hours, we had a stack of about 25 poles, and we were eating lunch with the kids when things went absolutely crazy. At first we got screamed at big time. Then, stuff comes flying out of the bush at us, like rocks, tree limbs, and sod hunks. Sounded like things breaking in the bush and whacking sounds. It was f***ing nuts. Nothing hit any of us. We had been in that area many times prior in the years, and never had anything like this occur. Our 8-year-old jumped into the truck and locked all the doors, with the other 4 of us doing laps around the vehicle. I grabs our 3-year-old and gets her into the back seat through the window, and I'm trying to figure out who is screwing with us. It is funny now, not so much back then. Now this is weird. First, whoever or whatever was crawling on all 4s over all the downed timber and old logs, staring right at me as it moved back and forth. From what I could make out, and another 1 or 2 were behind it, also on all 4s, crawling around behind with the closer one that seemed way bigger, one that I could make out, although the bush. These ones were about 15 to 20 feet inside the tree line. We were parked in the ditch off the old lease road. About 30 to 40 feet further into the timber was another 2, or a couple person's silhouette we could make out. They were moving through the trees, making animal crazy sounds, big deep volume. We were like, holy crap, no person could do that. No way anyone could belt it out like that. Not a chance. This went on for what seemed a good couple minutes. All of the kids began freaking out and crying inside the vehicle. My wife was standing with me when we were watching this go on, and then started telling me, let's get out of here. And I am trying to get a grip on the shit I am looking at through inside the trees. I don't think I was freaked out by what was happening. I could just not process what I was looking at. I still recall thinking, why are some people trying to scare the crap out of us out here? Number 4. Whitecliff Regional Park. Despite being posted on the Sasquatch Alberta website, our next tale actually takes place in British Columbia. However, it does feature a man who went out looking for a creature and claims to have come across the legendary cryptid as well as their young. In his own words, this happened near Whitecliff Regional Park, Perry Creek Road, Cranbrook, BC. I was out a few years ago looking for Sasquatches. I made noises to attract any creature and I got several responses. They kept getting closer and closer. Then I heard the footsteps, more vocalizations, closer and closer. Then I saw it. For only a second and a half, a large, upright creature with a smaller child creature brushed past my view and disappeared into the forest. I started chasing it, but could not keep up. Right where I saw it moments before, there were footprints 6 inches into the ground, and hair on trees where they were. I know this sighting is not in Alberta, but pretty close, so I just wanted to let you know about my experience. I did take photos, but they were lost when my old phone broke. I had been there 3 to 5 times before with friends, but we didn't find much evidence until the other time I reported about earlier today. I have not been back there because I am just shocked and kind of terrified of what I saw. I went out there just because I didn't know what was on the dirt road past the Whitecliff Regional Park, and I just wanted to know what I would find back there. Number 3. Medicine Hat. Next, we have a tale from a man who saw Bigfoot as a child without ever being aware what a Sasquatch even was until this encounter. However, this experience with the legendary creature left quite an impression on the man, who can still recall the event in great detail, even all these years later. As he put it, I first started reading about Sasquatches in 1972 after my first encounter. I was born in Calgary, and about once a month we would go to Banff, Kananaskis, or Bragg Creek to go camping. I got used to seeing bats and other wildlife at a young age. On the last weekend of August 1972, we went to Medicine Hat to visit friends. On Saturday the 26th, we went to have a picnic around 10:30 a.m. in Strathcona Park. We started a fire and then went down to the South Saskatchewan River to swim and play in the water. It was sunny and warm with no wind. At about 1 p.m., it was decided that we would make our way down the winding path to our campsite, which was about 150 yards away. Eager to get a hot dog on a stick, I ran ahead of everyone else. About 75 yards down the path, I was jogging when I suddenly smelled a strong odor. I stopped, and it smelled like a freshly washed dog that had rolled around in garbage for a week. I heard a light rustle to the right, and as I turned to look, I saw a large black and red furred back of something facing away from me to the west. I could hear the creak about 30 yards ahead of the creature I was looking at. Its butt was a couple inches off the ground. It was hunched forward at some Saskatoon bushes, and it had a cone-shaped head that seemed to be sitting on its shoulders. It was about 4 feet wide at the shoulders and about 5 feet high. It made no sound or movement, but when I thought to myself, what am I looking at? I was answered by a thought of, you don't see me, I'm not here. I wondered what I was looking at again, and again I got the same response. Suddenly it quietly muttered a chattering sound, and when I heard it, the thought of get out of here now entered my head. Without hesitation, I started running towards the campsite, and as I did, I could hear a heavy thump, thump, thump sound running towards the creek, and the sound of bushes being crunched. When everyone else got back, I asked if they had seen or heard it, which no one had. I was told it must be a bear, but I said it didn't look or act like any bear I ever saw. Then, a friend said I must have seen a Sasquatch, and everyone laughed. I asked, what is a Sasquatch, as I had never heard or seen the Patterson-Gimlin film. When they told me what it was, I said that it was probably what I saw, and everyone laughed again. I started to read and learn as much as I could about them. I forgot to mention that the Sasquatch was about 30 feet away, with an unobstructed view. Number 2. Pullman sighting. Alberta is one of the best places in Canada to go hunting, if that is an activity that you enjoy. There is a variety of wildlife and strict rules in place to ensure that none of the animals are over-hunted. However, you can't get tags to hunt a Sasquatch, which is probably for the best, as this hunter found out when he was making his way up a mountain and came face to face with an animal he wasn't expecting. This is his story. I was hunting 19 kilometers north of Coleman, Alberta. It was late afternoon, early evening. I moved up the mountain, following a game trail through some heavy brush, tracking some elk in the area, and I came upon what I thought was a very large black bear in the brush, about 30 feet ahead of me. It stood up on two legs and turned to look at me when I realized it was not a bear, but a large, heavy-set animal with a black face and no snout, ape-like in appearance. It looked surprised but not scared of me. It backed away from me and disappeared up the slope rapidly and reappeared short about 150 feet up the slope. It looked down at me and called at me with a weird screech that made my hair stand up. It then quickly disappeared up the slope. I tried to go up a little farther, but the slope was very steep and I couldn't figure out how it was able to move up the hill so quickly. Shortly afterwards, a bunch of bighorn sheep came stampeding down the slope from where the thing had gone. They looked terrified, but ran right past me in their haste. I decided to join them and made my way back, looking over my shoulder the whole way. I could have shot it, but I honestly didn't know what it was. I did not return to the area last fall because I am no longer comfortable hunting in that area. I haven't told anyone, but I found one of your posters in Kananaskis, and I thought that I should at least tell you guys about it. I'm an engineer in Calgary, so I do not want my customers to think that I am a kook, but I know what I saw, and it wasn't a bear or someone in a suit. It was a real animal, and I think it was a Sasquatch. Number 1. A log driver's waltz. When driving on the roads, it is important to pay attention so you can avoid objects that are thrown at your vehicle, whether it be garbage, rocks, or even giant logs being thrown at you by a cryptid, as this motorist learned in our next story. Driving north on the existing right-of-way, off to the right and part way up the mountainside was a staging area for logs, pre-cut to length and stacked, awaiting pickup. The beginning of the slope uphill was approximately 100 feet from our truck. The logs were staged about 200 feet up the mountainside. Keeping in mind that as you look up the mountainside, the staged logs become further away from the truck, left of center. These logs weren't overly large in diameter, but I would estimate them at 8 to 12 inches. The vehicle was traveling at roughly 15 kilometers an hour. The weather was slightly overcast with a light mist of rain. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a log descending from the staging area to my right and being propelled towards us and the truck, passing through the air in front of us and landing off to the left, only feet from us as we passed by. The log appeared to be launched as opposed to falling off the stack. It would be impossible to fly through the air in the distance it did without some momentum behind it. At this point, I accelerated and removed myself as quickly as possible from the area. Not knowing if this is a hot spot for sightings or not, most likely this just becomes another story without verification. I cannot state that this would be a Sasquatch or Bigfoot incident, but I know of nothing else that could possibly throw a log and project it at my vehicle from that distance. The added elevation could make it possible for the log to travel that distance. I have made mention of this incident to other organizations in the past, but did not follow up with any requests. Today,
Number 5. Snow Waset. Coming up first on our list of icy cold little critters is the Snow Waset, a fearsome, legless little cryptid and a local one to boot, so I had to include it. Anything that comes from the greater Canada area is a big deal for me. It winters by the Great Lakes and the Hudson Bay, and in the rest of the year crawls up to Newfoundland and Labrador. Totally the wrong time of year, buddy. You gotta go to Newfoundland in the winter for Jake's dinner. Anyway, a Snow Waset is like a weasel. It's a long, furry creature, except it has no legs. Except in the summertime, where it does have legs and also turns green. If I was a biologist, I would love to get my hands on this thing and figure that out. That particular part of the lore of this creature is really fascinating to me. Why would a creature shed its legs like baby teeth? What cruel joke of evolution is that? It's like a mammal sandworm. Anyway, I gotta move on. When it's in its legless, winterized form, it burrows deep beneath the snow and ambushes its prey by surprise and drags them into the frozen underground. Absolutely horrifying. A frozen, legless, furry little snake is not pleasant by any definition. A Waset is said to be 4 times as large as a wolverine and 40 times as hungry, requiring a vast amount of meat to keep it sustained. Doesn't shed enough calories shedding those legs. I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm so hung up about this, my ghouls, but I am. Maybe it's because there's not actually that much information about the Snow Waset out there. Sightings and stories about it date back mostly hundreds of years, and there haven't been too much buzz about them ever since. Perhaps they're extinct. Or perhaps they've all just burrowed under too deep where I can't see them. Either way, the only thing that really stood out for me is they turn green and have no legs, so I'm gonna keep banging on that. And hey, when it's this cold outside, what do you really need to go out for? Stay inside, order some food, turn the heat up, and keep watching Top 5 Scary for the rest of the night. And while you're there, maybe think about tossing a subscribe your way. It's not too much trouble. Number 4, the Knuck. Coming up next on this list is the Knuck, a cryptid that I had never heard of before researching for this video, so I hope it's new to you too and you get to learn something cool. The Knuck is an old Nordic myth, a demon of the sea appearing as a horrifying demonic, part horse, part man, part thing hybrid. Seriously, this thing is disgusting. It looks like somebody glued a bunch of leftover horse parts and man parts together, and it's completely skinless, leaving its exposed flesh to all the elements to see. Kinda looks like one of those behind the scenes video of how they make McDonald's chicken nuggets, you know? The Knuck is said to be trapped in the sea during the warmer months of the year, and then come winter is set free to wreak all kinds of havoc. This thing is pure evil, destroys just by breathing. The horsey head part emits toxic fumes just by opening its wretched maw, and this vapor causes crops to wilt, people to fall ill, and drought soon follows after. I see why they keep this thing locked up for most of the year, because it kinda sounds like a royal nuisance. It's thought that the Knuck was first created by old Nordic storytellers as a way of rationalizing and explaining away things like drought and plague destroying the harvest. It's much easier to put a face to your problems, and when that problem is a wretched flayed horseman, it's easy to get angry at that. When stories of the Knuck were told, it was thought to be so evil that its name was always said in a hushed whisper for fears of speaking too loudly of it could attract its attention. Oh, I wish I knew that about 2 minutes ago. I just said its name like 16 times very loudly. It's said that if you were ever to encounter the dread Knuck to find the nearest fresh body of water, this sickly creature of the sea is deathly afraid of fresh water, I guess. You'd think a creature with all that skin exposed wouldn't like salt water or the cold, but hey, there you go, to each their own. You do you, terrifying skinless monster horseman. Number 3, a Chenu. A Chenu is an Algonquin creature of folklore a bit similar to a Wendigo, but with some fun regional twists. While both creatures hunt in wooded northern areas, and are both commonly associated with the wintertime, a Wendigo is usually depicted as a stretched out, emaciated monster, whereas a Chenu is depicted as being massive, very furry, and only getting larger and larger the more it eats. Actually, reading that back now, I realize that's not terribly impressive. Most things get larger and larger as they eat. Much like a Wendigo though, a Chenu is thought to have been formerly a man who was turned into a beast, either through their greedy ways, refusing to feed the starving, or for those who give in to the darkest of temptations and consume human flesh willingly. A Chenu is described as looking like a cross between an old man and a beast, large and imposing in appearance, with big chunks of their own flesh missing, possibly self-inflicted. They cover themselves in the forest, hiding themselves with leaves, bark, snow, pine needles, until they look like a horrible lint roller of the woods that walks upright. Interestingly, unlike a Wendigo, it's thought that the process of turning into a Chenu can actually be reversed. There's some good news. In some folk tales, the way to cure a Chenu is a special medicine that can cause them to vomit up their frozen heart and vomit up the flesh that they've consumed, causing the afflicted to revert back to their human form in a sight that is no doubt disgusting for everybody. But if this isn't possible, if you don't have this medicine on hand, or it's just not feasible to trick a Chenu, you can also get it to eat salt, which will apparently melt it from the inside. Poor Chenu. You're forced to live a tormented existence as a snow monster, isolated from your former friends, doomed to hunt on your former species, consuming only the darkest meat available, and you can't even order a little bit of salt for your dinner, eating a totally flavorless diet. I got nothing but sympathy for you, Chenu. Number 3, Kamakiri. I think it's really fascinating what each culture's cryptids look like, you know? Each culture creates cryptids and they all put their fun little spins on it, and whenever I get to make these videos, I learn all sorts of really cool mythological stuff that I'd never heard of before, and I sincerely hope you get that out of these videos too. I'd never heard of this next one, the Kamakiri, but I am obsessed with it now. Coming to us from Japan, this yokai, which is like a Japanese type of demon, appears like a weasel except with razor sharp sickle-like claws, like a real-life Sneasel from Pokemon. I'm actually amazed there's no Pokemon directly based on a Kamakiri. They seem like perfect for it. They have spiny fur, similar to a hedgehog, like prickly little needles, but they bark like a dog, and their claws could not be any sharper, and they're sickle-shaped. And also, a lot of depictions of them are downright adorable. These funny little creatures are extremely lightweight and have learned how to ride the currents of the wind to travel. They honestly sound kind of like radical in like a California surfer way. The legends of the Kamakiri come out of the Chubu region of Japan, when vicious cold winds were so powerful they would cut people down directly. And these legends would take the form of the spirit called the Kamakiri, which was the winds themselves as this furry little miscreant. It would attack at your legs, causing you to fall down, exposed and helpless, while it sucked at your blood. It's said that no blood occurs from their woundings because of this, as a Kamakiri moves so quickly and sucks it all up. That's almost considerate of it, doesn't leave a stain. These creatures move so quickly, and they're so good at hiding, that they're apparently completely completely invisible to the naked eye, appearing as nothing more than a sharp, freezing wind on your skin. Amusingly, there's some debate as to whether or not Akamatachi's true origin is actually nothing more than a silly pun. There's a stance samurai would use called a kamatachi, translating loosely to sword stance, which would explain, it's a sharp thing. I don't know where the stance comes in, but it's sharp. However, there are legends all throughout Japan, throughout many, many regions, all telling stories of creatures that ride the wind and attack humans, and the sickle weasel remains among the most popular and among the most adorable. Sorry, Kamataichi, you are just so cute. If anybody knows where to get like a stuffed toy of this little guy, please comment under the video. I need to know. Number 1, the Yeti. Coming in at the number 1 spot, a mainstay of any trip to the mountain, the Yeti. I mean, who else could possibly take the number 1 spot on a list about winter cryptids? Maybe Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Does he count as a cryptid? I guess he was. Maybe he's more like a mutant. Anyway, a Yeti is an American manufacturer specializing in outdoor products such as ice coolers, vacuum insulated drinkware, and I'm reading the wrong one. Sorry. Let's do that again. A Yeti refers to an ape-like creature thought to live in the mountains in the Himalayas, standing upright like a man and walking on 2 legs, and is usually pretty big, like 8 feet tall, with long arms, broad feet, and long brownish hair and sunken eyes. It kind of sounded a bit like me, to be honest. While it's pretty common to draw a Yeti as just being like a big giant white gorilla, they're actually pretty different, and most traditional depictions of a Yeti color it with darker fur. They're probably one of the oldest cryptids out there that's still talked about so fondly, with stories of Yetis going all the way back to 326 BC, when Alexander the Great sought out to capture one to see for himself while he was conquering the Indus Valley, although he was told that no Yeti could survive at an altitude low enough to meet him, and Alexander wept, for there were no more Yetis left to conquer. It's got several names. It's sometimes called a Sasquatch, or in the West it's popularly referred to as an abominable snowman, although that's a term by British officers who were stationed in the Himalayas, as no natives to the regions call it that. The name Yeti possibly comes from the Tibetan words Yeti, meaning a man-like animal, or from Meti, meaning bear in some Nepalese and Tibetan dialects, which would make a good bit of sense, as it's thought that a number of Yeti sightings over the years that led to it being such a widely recognized cryptid could actually just be bear sightings being mistaken in the frosty air. In fact, there's a theory that Yeti sightings are from hybrid polar bears that had bred with grizzly bears, which has been recorded to happen, just not really anywhere where Yeti sightings are really made, so kinda up in the air. In Sherpa tradition, it's said that a Yeti is a powerful, mystical being, and a Yeti can choose to whom it will make itself visible to, choosing to only appear to those who believe in it. So if you're ever trekking the Himalayas and worried about an attack, here's a little advice for you: just don't believe in it. Although there are a good number of people who believe that the Yeti are an intelligent enough species that just want to be left alone to their own devices, living peacefully in the mountains. Not so abominable after all.
Kicking off at number 5, the Loveland Frogmen. Hailing from the misty swamps and vast wetlands of rural Ohio, the Loveland Frogmen, also affectionately known as the Loveland Lizards, are a cryptid unlike no other and have reportedly appeared under several bizarre circumstances on a regular basis in Ohio's Clermont County. Allegedly, the first sightings of these eerie bipedal amphibians first occurred in 1955 and has proven to be one of the most intriguing cryptozoological mysteries in North America. The creatures themselves allegedly live in the temperate forests and wetlands of Clermont County and are able to survive the cold winters of the region without having to hibernate. Useful. During their first sighting at approximately 3:30 AM, a local businessman was driven down a lonely stretch of road, running alongside the Miami River on the outskirts of the small town known as Loveland, Ohio. Suddenly and out of nowhere, the man claimed to have witnessed 3 bipedal quasi-reptilian entities emerge from the dense reeds and begin to congregate by the side of the road. The man slowed down and turned out his lights as he pulled his car up to a curb to observe these creatures further. He claimed that they stood between 3 and 4 feet tall, were covered with leathery skin, and had webbed hands and feet. Their most distinguishing feature though was their distinctly frog-like head, which the man claimed bore deep wrinkles where their hair should have been. Well, since then, over 5 more sightings of the Loveland Frogmen have occurred over a 60-year period. What do you guys think? What's going on, Ohio? Next up at number 4, the nameless thing of Berkeley Square. And I absolutely love this story either way, because if you've ever heard of the famed 50 Berkeley Square in London, England, then you'll know that, cryptid or not, this place is terrifying enough. It's proof as well that there are some cases out there which irk on the realm of the paranormal and become a category so unexplainable that they don't really fit into anything, or can fit into anything. I don't know, it's pretty nebulous. Either way though, the haunted legacy of Berkeley Square has featured ghosts and poltergeists the world over, and it's widely considered to be one of the most haunted places in England. But there is one particular instance that takes the cake: the nameless thing of Berkeley Square. A tale that takes place in 1840 when a 20-year-old Sir Robert Walboys got into a drunken dare in which he had written off Berkeley Square and its paranormal reputation as a whole load of Kaiser Soze. He put money down that he could spend the night in the building's most cursed and haunted second floor, and so the next evening did exactly that, with a pistol in his hand. For robbers, I guess, and a makeshift pulley line attached to a bell in case he saw anything out of the ordinary. He drank a whole load of courage and tried to get some shut-eye, but well, of course, young Bobby Warboy's story cuts out there when the landlord was awoken by the bell rig ringing incessantly and ran upstairs to check on him. He found Robert Warboys dead as a doornail, slouched in the corner with his eyes bulging in terror. Legend has it that the landlord witnessed an amorphous, shadowy form with slime oozing from it, claws and tentacles and all dripping from its form, suddenly slink back into the shadows of the corner of the room and disappear. And since then, tales of the nameless thing of Berkeley Square are more common than any of us would actually like. Swinging in at number 3, the Kinderhook Blob, which is just a great name, really, isn't it? And if I'm being honest, the legend of the Kinderhook Blob is exactly what cryptid tales are made of, so strap in. It's sometime in 1962 New York, and on 6 separate occasions, multiple witnesses encountered a floating, mysterious blob-like creature that was so terrifying in its form that 2 men armed with shotguns fled in terror. The initial encounter was from a 10-year-old boy named Hallenbeck and his 7-year-old cousin Chari. They were playing in the dense woods nearby their house when all of a sudden they both heard this really high-pitched whistle noise, and suddenly, from behind a nearby pine tree, they witnessed a white amorphous object appear in full view, which slowly began writhing toward them. On 5 more occasions, which insanely would happen over the next 12 years, all the way until 1978, dozens of eyewitnesses would explain in vivid detail similar accounts of an amorphous white blob-like creature that would emerge from the woods, often attaching its tendrils to trees whilst incessantly making its way towards its victims, causing them to flee in terror. So much so that on one occasion 2 grown men tried blowing it to pieces with shotguns to no avail and then turned tail and ran. What I love about this story is the essence of a cryptid tale. For all intents and purposes, the Kinderhook Blob could be a disused weather balloon floating listlessly through the air, but because it was seen multiple times by multiple people in the right setting, the legend of the terrifying white blob quickly became a horrifying reality. Either that or it's a sentient alien lifeform that's going to consume us all, so yeah. Coming in next at number 2, the disappearance of Peter Grayson. The Groot Slang, or the Groot Slang, which in Afrikaans loosely translates to big snake, is a legendary creature widely considered to be one of the continent's most prolific cryptids, and is reputed to dwell exclusively in the deep caves and cavernous systems in the Richtersveld, South Africa. According to legend, the Groot Slang is a primordial creature that is reputedly as old as the world itself and dwells within what locals refer to as the bottomless pit, which also, conveniently enough, is also filled with precious diamonds. Well, diamonds historically have a proficiency of attracting daring adventurers, and one of those adventurers just so happened to be an English businessman known as Peter Grayson. In 1917, Grayson and a team of excavators began an expedition into the Richtersveld cave system, accompanied by several local guides. After heading out into the rocky desert landscape, and upon hearing that Grayson intended to descend into the bottomless pit, unwittingly the lair of the Groot Slang, the local guides quickly left after warning Grayson that they'd lost friends and family to the violent serpent before, and they weren't going to do it again. He shrugged it off and alongside his 2 excavators headed deep into the cave, and well, that's the last that they heard of any of them. The Grayson dynasty faded into obscurity after their patriarch was never seen alive again, but as the legend goes, one of the local guides returned to the cave a day or so later after feeling guilty for abandoning Grayson and his team. At the entrance of the cave, he found the body of an excavator, half of his body actually, to be specific. His legs and most of his torso had been ripped clean off, and he died attempting to crawl back out. What a way to go. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, the legend of Yuri Grando. And I just have to tell this cryptid story because it's one of my favourites, and it's also considered to be one of the first historical instances of vampirism. As the legend goes, Yuri Grando Eljovic was a villager and poor peasant from the region of Istria, which now makes up modern-day Croatia. Historically, he was referred to as a strigoi, strigon or strigun, a local word for something that resembles a vampire and a warlock. Sometime around 1656, Yuri died due to an unknown illness, but according to legend, he regularly returned from the grave at night as a vampire to terrorize his village until his decapitation in 1672. The legend tells that for 16 years after his death, Yuri would rise from his grave by night and terrorize the village. The village priest Giorgio, who had buried Yuri 16 years previously, discovered that at night somebody would knock on the doors around the village, and on whichever door he knocked, someone from that house would die within the next few days. Eventually, the villagers rallied after witnesses saw the corpse of Yuri roaming the streets, and led by the town's mayor, chased and tried to kill him with a hawthorn stick, but failed to pierce his supernatural flesh. The next night, 9 people went to the graveyard and dug up Yuri's coffin, finding a perfectly preserved corpse with a smile on its face. It was Yuri with pristine white flesh and no signs of decomposition. They tried to stake him once more, but witnesses noted that the stick would not penetrate its flesh. Eventually, the villagers were so terrified and kind of fed up with his vampire antics that a brave villager known as Stepan Milicic took a saw and decapitated the corpse. As soon as it tore Yuri's skin, the vampire screamed and blood began gushing from the cut. Allegedly, a man that was presumed dead for 16 years. Yeah. That one's pretty worrying, right? Kicking off at number 5, the Silver Woman. And this story comes from a police motorway patrol woman from Portsmouth, England, who explains that her career regularly confronts her with situations that are both bizarre and unnerving. But this one kind of takes the cake. On the 25th of November around 6:30 PM during a routine speed camera setup in the Portsmouth city centre, her speed trap began picking up random tracings of non-existent objects in pitch black darkness, hurtling past her vehicle at around 30 to 40 miles per hour. Now, I know what you might be thinking, the device was obviously malfunctioning, but that wasn't the case, and our police officer had already thought of that. She trained the camera manually back onto the road surface to see what had been picked up, and she was shocked to discover that on the screen was what could only be described as humanoid figures running up and down the street at about 40 feet ahead of the vehicle. Strangely enough, they seemed to have a silver appearance to them, almost shimmering and translucent. She looked out of the window and again, nothing was there, but when she looked back at the screen, about 10 feet away from the vehicle was one of the same silvery entities standing motionless, facing away from the van, hulking and breathing in a strange fashion, as if they were weighing up taking on the police officer. What were they? Well, we'll never know, and when she played the tape back for her fellow officers, the silvery entities were nowhere to be seen. Yeah, I've got no clue about this one. Coming in at number 4, the folk monster. Now, Bigfoot is obviously the heavy hitter of the cryptid world. People have devoted their entire lives to hunting down the elusive mountain creature, stretching all the way across the wildlands of North America, as well as similar instances across the planet. But there is one little town in America that seems to be the hotspot for these sightings: Folk, Arkansas, and in 1971 it became the scene of its most terrifying legend. Meet Bobby Ford, a man who vehemently claims he's seen Bigfoot or a version of it, describing it as 7 feet tall, ridiculously fast and covered in long brown hair, and he saw it up close and personal. It was a Saturday when Bobby and his brother were out hunting a short distance from their rural home when they heard screams in the distance. Bobby's wife, Elizabeth Ford, was frozen in horror when a creature reached through the front window, massive and hairy with glowing red eyes that made no sound except for heavy breathing. When Bobby and his brother ran back to the home, the creature turned and grabbed him as he sprinted up to the porch. It tackled him to the ground with ease and then disappeared into the woodland. The creature had left behind clear tracks in the house and nearby area, 3-toed footprints that matched the deep 3-fingered scratches that were made in the wood of the front porch. Bobby Ford was rushed to hospital and treated for minor wounds and shock, and the family were so terrified by the encounter that they moved out. They'd only lived there a week. That's terrible timing. Next up at number 3, the Grey Man of Ben Macdui. Ben Macdui in Gaelic, Mountain of the Son of Duff, is an awe-inspiring peak of the Scottish Highlands, staking the claim as one of Britain's highest mountains and the highest of the Cairngorms National Park. It's been scaled by countless people throughout history, but there are those that claim that there's something more sinister living out on the mountain: the Grey Man of Ben Macdui, and it doesn't like visitors. The creature is said to be at least 20 feet tall, and one eyewitness of the creature's presence, a respected professor and mountain climber named Norman Colley, said that he was first aware of something following him during his ascent after hearing strange footsteps behind him. Alone, isolated on the mountain, something was following him. and it wasn't human. The footsteps were laborious and delayed, as if that whatever was following him was much, much taller than he was. When he saw it, he described the grey man as vaguely human-shaped, brown in hue and fur, and shrouded in a strange grey mist. In 1945, a similar thing happened to a renowned mountain climber named Peter Densham, who described the exact same encounter with the exact same creature. Again, in 1958, the Scots magazine wrote of a similar account from naturalist Alexander Tunion, who this time found himself armed with a rifle and fired several rounds into the grey man. He thought he'd hit it, whatever it was, but after trekking over through the snow, found no sign of the creature. It vanished away like fog rolling across a mountain, and the mystery of the grey man of Ben Macdui remains unsolved. Swinging in at number 2, the Cabbage Tunnel Monster, which is an urban legend from my current stomping grounds of Toronto, Ontario, that is grounded in such bizarre circumstances that it remains a warning not to go wandering through the dark tunnels of downtown Toronto. I'm talking about the path. Ever. Don't go there. In 1978, in the eastern Cabbagetown district of Toronto, a 51-year-old man known as Ernest had a terrifying encounter in the network of tunnels that sprawl beneath the city. He had been out searching the neighbourhood for a missing kitten that him and his wife had been raising when he stumbled across a tunnel entrance and decided to explore. After venturing 10 feet into the gloom, Ernest suddenly came across a creature that looked somewhat like a long, thin monkey, around 3 feet in height, with large teeth and covered in grey fur. It had unsettling eyes, he described, that peered out of the darkness in a bright orange hue. Even more unsettling, Ernest claimed that the creature spoke to him. "Go away, go away," it said in a hissing voice before slinking down a tunnel off onto the side. Ernest was reluctant to come forward with his story. He was a respected member of the community and he feared that he'd be ridiculed by his peers, but after being convinced by a friend, he spoke to the Toronto Sun, and a group of journalists and investigators followed him into the same tunnel. Although they didn't see the creature, they did see that the narrow tunnel led to a strange, gloomy chasm that dropped into the unseen sewer system below. And even stranger, they found the maimed, half-eaten carcass of a cat buried loosely beneath the dirt and debris. It permeated the legend of the Cabbagetown Tunnel Monster, and whatever it was, we may never know for sure. Just stay away. And finally, our number 1 spot, the Jersey Devil. Of course, it has to be perhaps one of the most notorious cryptids of all time, the famed Devil of Jersey, whose origin dates all the way back to when New Jersey was still a British colony. Hundreds upon hundreds of tales have been spawned from the legend of the Jersey Devil, dating from the early 1700s right up to recent times. As the legend goes, Mrs. Jane Leeds came from a poor family who carved out an existence in the bleak pine barrens of Jersey, a rugged place with dense forests, sandy soil and deep swamps. In 1735, Mrs. Leeds discovered that she was pregnant with her 13th child, which is, as they say, unlucky for some. Now, Mrs. Leeds wasn't too keen on giving birth, to say the least, and she claimed to friends and relatives that the devil can take the next one. And that's exactly what he did. When the baby was born, it was monstrous, with a scaly reptilian body, a horse's head, bat's wings, and a long forked tail. He spread his wings, shot up out of the chimney, and soared out across the pine barrens. The legend of the Jersey Devil was born. Now, whatever you think of this cryptid, truth, or urban legend, it's the frequency that the Jersey Devil appears in contemporary folklore that is important. Hundreds of people have reported sightings of a strange, bat-like creature with wings and a forked tail, flapping its wings across the pine barrens and cackling into the night. In 1816, Joseph Bonaparte, the brother of Napoleon, reported seeing the creature while hunting game in the woods. In 1840, a respected minister pointed his congregation towards a ghastly creature flapping above his church, and in 1909, literally thousands of people saw the same creature on the same day at the same time at multiple locations. In fact, it got so bad that schools had to close down and people just flat out refused to go outside. And still, to this day, New Jersey natives will warn you to tread carefully in the pine barrens.
Number 5, Kamakiri. I love doing videos and lists like these ones because I get to spend a lot of time researching into these different cultures and cryptids I never really would have known about without these opportunities. So thanks for watching stuff like this so I can keep on doing them. That's my greedy reason behind it. I just like learning. Our first cryptid from the land of the rising sun is going to be the Kamakiri. This yokai appears as a weasel with razor sharp sickle-like claws. If you're a Pokemon head, big Pokemon fan, Sneasel from 2nd Gen, the dark ice type, he's based on a Kamakiri. They've got spiny fur, similar to a hedgehog, and they bark like a dog, and they have razor sharp claws. These adorable, funny little guys are extremely lightweight, lighter than the wind itself even, and as such, travel by gusts of wind soaring through the sky like they're radical, furry little windsurfers. Legends of the Kamataichi first came about in the Chubu region of Japan, notorious for its icy sharp winds that were so powerful they would blow men over. These legends then took the form of the Kamataichi, the winds literally personified as this little vermin miscreant. It attacks you in the legs and it knocks you over. You're all exposed and helpless while it picks away at your vitals with its little sickle hands. These creatures are surgical when they strike. A Kamataichi sucks away and feeds on any of the gore left behind by their wounds. These creatures are said to be totally stealthy, impossible to see with the naked eye, and blend into their surroundings well. And here's some pedantic little wordplay trivia. I know all the kids at home love pedantic wordplay trivia. There's some debate as to whether or not Kamataichi's name is nothing more than a cheesy pun. There's a stance that old sword fighters in Japan would use called Kamataichi, translating loosely to sword stance, and well, you can see if you just literally squish those two sounds together. And if you're looking for way more cryptid content, creepy tales, true stories, fake stories, aliens, conspiracies, horror movies, and basically just about everything weird and freaky that could possibly happen on this world, Top 5 Scary is the place to be. So hit subscribe, ring that bell when you do, and stay scared. But also stay watching this video, okay? Nothing I love more than seeing you guys watch them all the way to the end. Now let's keep going. Number 4, TeTe. Coming in next is going to be a fairly newer urban legend, but it gripped me so much I had to include it in this. It's the TeTe. TeTe is a legend about the ghost of a student who was slain when she fell onto a railway line, where she was then split in half by a train. No easy way to say that, might as well just get it out of the way. Much like an Enrio, which, hold on to that thought for now, we're going to come back to that in a minute. She's a vengeful spirit of a wronged woman who lurks train stations at night, stalking out for her victims. She drags herself across the ground using her arms, dragging the spine sticking out of her torso, scraping across the ground, making a horrifying tick sound from where she gets her name. And you thought that was just like a cute little sounding name, didn't you? Nope. Try if you can. Just try to get the mental image out of your head of a ghost girl clawing along on just her hands and elbows and her spine following along behind her. She's also carrying a giant sickle with her, so there's that too. She's really not much of a farmer, so I'll tell you right now, she's not using that for crops. If she finds you, TeTe will chase you and slice you in half. Whoops. Some variations say that she only takes your legs, which I guess is better, but really not by much. There's a specific variation of the legend that gives TeTe a bit more backstory for her origin, saying her name is Kashima Raiko, and she's a specific entity. She died when her legs were severed from her body, and the next part gets a bit creepy, so you might want to grab onto something, maybe put a little salt circle around your computer. It's said that when an individual learns of Kashima's story, she'll appear to you within the next month. So start timing now, I guess. Kashima Raiko is said to haunt bathroom stalls asking where her legs have gone. If you answer in a way she doesn't approve of, she'll take them from you. Incredibly bizarrely, most of all, this isn't the only bathroom-themed horror story on this list, and I'm not joking, so we'll talk about that in a minute, but in the meantime, sit tight and wait what I could possibly mean. Number 3, Kamakiri. Something I really like about reading about Japanese yokai and their mythological monsters when you read about a bunch of them is that they tend to kind of fall into 2 categories, you know? It's either the most terrifying thing I have ever heard in my life, a story of a malevolent spirit that's been wronged and will haunt you and do something unspeakable for a painful death, or they're just like weird little goblins or like weird little ghouls that go around doing silly little things. The Kamakiri is one of the silliest little demons I have ever read about, so that's why I'm including them, because they're hilarious. A Kamakiri looks like a weird little bird, like a little bird monster, with a razor sharp beak and very pointed claws. They're teeny tiny and very sneaky to move undetected. So what does the dreaded Kamakiri do? Are you ready for this? Hold on to something, because this is going to terrify you. It breaks into your house at night and it cuts your hair. They hide in your roof and they wait at night for the perfect moment to strike, and then they go in and they just mess up your perfect do. They layer it all weird. They cut the ends right off. They frost your tips, and they go after anyone, okay? They're not picky. If you've got a head of hair, they want to snip it up. Only the baldies are safe now. They wait until you're asleep, and if you're wondering, you're just sitting there like, why would anyone tell a story about this monster? Why would anyone make this up? It was in periods of Japanese history when long hair was really the only fashion and accepted hairstyle. I would have done great. So the idea of a nobleman having his hair cut in the middle of the night was like spine chilling. These days though, it just makes Kamakiri sound like he's like a college prankster than it does a real monster. But that's only half of why I thought this creature was so funny. Aside from the split end touch-ups, a Kamakiri cutting your hair is said to be a sign that the victim is about to unknowingly marry a yokai. Shapeshifters like Yorigumo or Kitsune can trick young men into marriage. So the Kamakiri steps in and he cuts your hair to let you know you might accidentally end up marrying a demon spider shapeshifter woman. And I just got paid to say that sentence out loud. We made it, ma. Kamakiri, you might win the top 5 scary award for one of the funniest cryptids we've ever talked about on the channel. A solid number 2 compared to my true favorite, Akaname, the demon that comes into your bathroom and eats waste, which I guess would make him number 2. That's the rudest joke I'll ever tell on this channel. I'm so sorry. You guys can cut that if you want. Okay, moving on. Number 2, Akamanto. The Akamanto, also known as the Red Cloak, is a masked spirit and may very well be one of the most evil, weird creatures I've ever heard described in folklore, so just wait till you get a load of this. Not like any good folktale, there are some local variations in how Akamanto operates, but the elements that remain consistent across all tales are that the Akamanto preys on you during your most personal moments. You know, he tends to come for kings who sit on a porcelain throne. He visits you in the smallest room in the house. He catches you with your pants down. This demon comes for you when you're on the toilet, if that isn't quite getting across yet. I didn't know how to just say it. The Akamanto then offers you a deadly choice, pulls a little matrix on you, and it asks you to choose between red toilet paper or blue toilet paper. Kind of like that one scene from Squid Games with the guy offering the paper. Actually, a little funny trivia, the creator of Squid Games confirmed this monster is what inspired that scene. So a little symbolism about that you didn't know about before and now you do. Now it's all a trick question, of course. Neither of the toilet papers this ghastly spirit has for you are anything like the Royale kittens. The red paper means you'll find yourself all cut up, leaving behind quite a mess. And the blue option means you'll be left gasping for air, clean, but slow and painful. The only way to escape the Akamanto's dreaded game is to tell him you've got enough, actually, and thanks for asking, but you're good. No, really, you just have to ignore him. Tell him you're good, or flush quick and hightail it out of there. You know, don't play it smart with him. Don't ask him for purple. Don't ask him for sandpaper. No wise guy answers. He's a toilet paper demon. He doesn't want to hear any of that. It's said that if you mess with him, you mess with the Akamanto, he drags you feet first into the underworld. At least he doesn't flush you. Why did they make that? Why did the backstory behind the toilet paper demon? I do not know. Okay, number 1, Enrio. And our number 1, I went with the Enrio. And Enrio translates almost literally to a vengeful spirit. And in every definition of the words, that statement rings true. They're also sometimes called hatred spirits because an Enrio is specifically a ghost of someone who is capable of causing grievous harm to the living. Enrio are almost always depicted as women who were wronged in their life. They're not exclusively women, but majority of them are. They were traumatized by their death, and they spend the rest of their days exacting revenge. God forbid women do anything fun, huh? Nailing down exactly what an Enrio is capable of is difficult because there are so many countless interpretations of the vengeful spirit, but just know at home that nothing good ever comes out of crossing an Enrio. You can expect things like sleep paralysis, telekinesis, curses, evil magic, like I said, really nothing good. It's worth noting that as part of the legend of an Enrio, her vengeance can never be satisfied, no matter how many enemies she fells in her wake. An Enrio will go after her lovers, family, whoever she had the most lingering pain for. And after she's done with that, well, she'll just attack indiscriminately. You gotta do something with the day, right? Enrio are a very traditional Japanese story, popping up in a lot of performance art pieces like No, Kabuki, and Rakugo, and they even continue to be the center stage in modern works. Probably the most famous Enrio I think most Westerners would know about is Sadako Yamamura from The Ring, otherwise known as Samura if you only saw the American version, and if you have, you gotta fix that at some point for me, okay? And Enrio traditionally is described as wearing a white barrio kimono. She's got wild, unkempt, long black hair obscuring her face, and in stage plays with dramatic white and blue paint, so just, she looks like the girl from The Ring, basically. And how does one stop an Enrio? Oh, you don't. Yeah, there's nothing. Once she's coming for you, she's coming for you. So, you know, be nice. Just be nice to the ladies in your life and hope that they never come back as vengeful revenge spirits. Number 5, the Fresno Nightcrawlers. Starting off the list is going to be my favorite cryptids in the whole wide world, the Fresno Nightcrawler. If you've never seen footage of them, it's going to change your life. Look at them. Look at the way they stride around like a pair of pants that came to life. These things are the absolute perfect cryptid to me. There's never been a story of them hurting anything or anyone. There's no livestock that goes missing when the Nightcrawlers are around. It's just some chill dudes going for a late night stroll. I can really get down with the lifestyle that the Fresno Nightcrawlers are about. The Nightcrawlers were first spotted in Fresno, California, which makes a lot of sense why they're called that. They've been mostly spotted in California almost exclusively, a couple times, save for one reported sighting in Poland, so must have been a pretty long walk they were going on. The first recorded sighting was by a man in Fresno named Jose, who claimed that during the night he heard his dogs freaking out at something outside. He went to go see what his dogs were making so much noise about, and through a security camera system in his home, he saw the two little crawlers making their way around. He woke up his brother to come watch the footage as well, but by the time he'd awoken, the creature was already gone. The next morning, they called in investigators to inspect the lawn and the footage, but there was absolutely no trace of anything. No footprints, no spots, nothing. All they had was grainy CCTV footage of the Nightcrawlers making their way down the lawn. Since their sighting, there's been endless debate as to just what the Nightcrawlers are. Some suspect spirits or ghosts, because they do look kind of spectral in the video, but a number of people have also put forward the idea that the Nightcrawlers could be visitors from another world. They don't look like anything on this planet, so maybe they came down. Who's to say? The only person who can truly decide is you. And hey, if you want to see loads more videos of things what might be cryptids or what might be aliens, then you already know the vibe. It's Top 5 Scary. We got more videos of cryptids and aliens that you could ever watch, but you're welcome to try. Stay subscribed and don't miss a scream. Number 4. The Enfield Horror. The Enfield Horror is a pretty notable cryptid in American history, and it gets its name from a small string of sightings when it terrorized the town of Enfield, Illinois. The creature has been described as a small, goblin-esque being. Oh, you know how I feel about goblins. It doesn't really resemble any living animals on this planet that it could very easily be described as. It's reported as having 3 legs and leathery skin and moving in a vaguely monkey-esque way compared to a baboon hopping around. So the first time the Enfield Horror was ever spotted, it was in 1973 by one Henry McDaniel. He and his wife had been out that night and were returning home and were greeted by their children. The kids had told their father that there was something they'd seen outside that was trying to get inside the house by scratching on the door. Mr. McDaniel initially assumed it was probably just a cat or a dog, but later on during the night, that peculiar scratching came back again at the front door. He went out to shoo the animal away and was shocked at what he saw. He described to police that it had 3 legs on it, a short body, 2 little short arms, and 2 pink eyes as big as flashlights. It stood 4.5 feet tall and was grayish colored, and it was trying to get into their house. McDaniel saw this weird little thing and thought best to rid the world of it and fired at it. He claims he struck the creature, telling police that, "When I fired that first shot, I know I hit." He says the creature hissed at him, claiming that it sounded like a wildcat hissing, and then proceeded to bound away in long leaps across the yard. The next day, police were alerted to the story and sent over to investigate the yard as to what happened. They didn't find much, but they did find 3-footed tracks throughout the yard. So just what on earth was the Enfield Horror? Or is that the operative word? Was it of this earth? Could it have been some animal that had lost a leg and was injured limping around? Or is it something that had slipped out of an enclosure from a UFO and was hopping around our planet looking for a new meal? Coming in at number 3 is the Chupacabra, one of the most famous cryptids maybe ever in urban folklore. For those somehow not in the know, the Chupacabra is often thought to be a canid-like monster, and is purportedly responsible for disappearances of livestock, predominantly throughout Mexico and the American Southwest, but also propping up in places like Puerto Rico. You know, a Chupacabra has been around whenever you find that your livestock has either gone missing or is found dead with all its blood sucked right out. This is actually where the name comes from. While most depictions of the Chupacabra almost always define it as being a coyote-like creature, albeit a twisted, mangled-looking one, usually described as a totally hairless dog with beady black eyes and a sleek figure, there are some stories and sightings of Chupacabras that describe it as being more like a demon or an alien, describing it as being a humanoid creature, often reptilian in nature, walking around on 2 legs and feeding on livestock. In all the years since Chupacabras have first been reported, though there are countless sightings, there's never been a fully recovered one that we couldn't explain. Everything that's been found by hunters always ends up turning out to be dogs with mange, being misattributed to being the cryptid. So maybe, is it possible that there's been a giant mix-up, and all the sightings of Chupacabras that report them as canines are just that? just sick dogs that get mistaken for looking something weird, and that the real Chupacabra is the reptilian, more bipedal sightings that get reported. It could explain why there's never been one recovered, and why livestock keeps going missing under bizarre circumstances. It's even possible that the drained livestock could be creatures that have been recovered to study, abducted under bizarre experiments. Could Chupacabras themselves be in a bizarre experiment that's been unleashed into our world? A hybrid chimera breed that was created by alien life and let loose on us to run havoc on us? Number 2. The Dover Demon. The Dover Demon looks outright like an alien, maybe more so than anything else on this list. Its description describes it as a pale, naked, leathery creature with a giant watermelon-esque head and no discernible facial features outside of 2 gigantic eyes. Kinda looks like Roger from American Dad. It looks like the exact depiction of a little gray man. The first ever sighting of the Dover Demon was in 1977 in the small town of Dover, Massachusetts. One Bill Bartlett was driving down the road with his friends late at night, until they saw something bizarre creeping along a low wall of loose stones on the side of the road. Initially, Bartlett assumed that it was just a cat, one of the most often mistaken creatures for cryptids. But as the headlights shone on it, he realized it wasn't like anything he had ever seen. The creature slowly looked up to stare at him, and he described it as having peach-colored skin with a rough texture akin to sandpaper. Not long after initially seeing the Dover Demon, it disappeared almost into thin air. The creature vanished. It's been wondered, actually, by cryptozoologists after this sighting if perhaps the creature had some sort of camouflage ability or some sort of transportation ability even. Given the extreme resemblance to little greys, the alien most commonly described as being the ones responsible for most abductions, could it be possible that the Dover Demon was something scouting out, a creature looking out from above the stars? Could that possibly explain why the creature was able to vanish so quickly? Was it just a remarkably sneaky little fella? Or is it possible that it was technologically advanced in some way, or being backed up by someone else who beamed it on back to whatever ship it came from? And finally, at our number 1 spot is the Flatwoods Monster, a creature that has long since thought to be alien in origin and not a cryptid as some have said. The Flatwoods Monster was first sighted in West Virginia because of course it was. Everything creepy is in West Virginia. West Virginia is nothing but beautiful, the most picturesque mountains you've ever seen in your life, and horrifying monsters all the way down. John Denver forgot to tell you that part in the songs. The Flatwood Monster was described as being 10 feet tall and roughly 4 feet wide. It's described as being more mechanical in nature than it is organic, kind of a Darth Vader deal going on. Its most notable feature is its giant head with 2 gigantic glowing eyes, described as either bright red or bright green depending on who's telling the story, and it's got a giant cowl in the shape of a spade behind this big orb, making it look like a big weird alien vampire. Its body was armored with thick vertical pipes, and it's got spindly little arms. The first ever sighting of the Flatwood Monster was in the 50s, 1952 to be specific. 3 boys saw something flailing out of the sky, hitting the ground nearby. The boys went home, and one of them told their mother that they thought they'd seen something fall from the sky, maybe an asteroid, and they wanted some help to go check it out. Always a good idea to ask permission from your mom first if you're gonna go check out an alien. Stranger Things kids would have saved themselves so much trouble if they did that. They gathered a small search party together, you know, just in case, and the group gathered and sought out the farm where the object landed, and eventually made their way to the top of the hill, where they saw a large ball of fire and reported smelling some mist that was making their eyes burn. A person in the search party then noticed that there were 2 bright glowing green eyes that were floating around in the trees, and he flashed his light to unveil what was hiding in the dark. They were then treated to a full view of the Flatwood Monster in all of its horror. The creature then hissed at them and flew upwards into the night, never to be seen again. Now, over the years, detractors have claimed that the Flatwood Monster could just have been the darkness playing tricks on people's eyes, and that it could have been just a barn owl obscured by shadow. I definitely kind of see that. I see a similar enough face shape. Barn owls are kind of weird looking, but I feel like the size would be hard to misunderstand. Plus, that doesn't really explain off the mist that was making everyone's eyes burn, or the strange thing that fell from the sky. If you ask me, there's a lot more to say the Flatwood Monster is an alien than there is to say it's an owl. Number 5, the Dover Demon. Starting off on our list is the cutest cryptid on this list in my opinion, but still a creepy little freak. I like to start with the cute ones to kind of ease you into it. The Dover Demon first appeared in Massachusetts in the town of Dover, lending it its name. It appears as a spindly little demon kind of looking thing that sort of resembles a little gray, the traditional big-eyed aliens that you see everywhere. The Dover Demon is identified by its blank face, its red glowing eyes, and its hunched, quadruped stature. The Dover Demon was first recorded in the late 1970s, discovered by 3 teenagers who were driving through Mass when they saw something bizarre being lit up by their headlights. Initially, they didn't think too much of it until they noticed that the creature in front of them looked more like a human than it did an animal. The driver, one Bill Bartlett, described the creature as resembling a baby with elongated arms, tan, sandpaper-like skin which was coarse looking, and no nose, ears, or mouth to speak of on its bulbous, enlarged head. Bartlett claims that he only got a good look at it for a few seconds before it vanished off into the night. Now, there are some who speculate that the Dover Demon is capable of rendering itself invisible or camouflaging itself because of the description of this story, and that during daylight it prefers to hide itself in the trees of Dover. Now, bizarrely, I think some skeptics write off the Dover Demon by claiming it was just a baby moose being seen at an odd angle or under strange conditions. And I don't know if I really buy that. I've never seen a baby moose at night in headlights, but I have seen a baby moose. They would have a bulbous head or front-facing eyes, and a baby moose doesn't have that, so I don't know if it's all that. A more pressing question, I think, is if the Dover Demon is a cryptid or perhaps a visitor from another planet, because it does look a lot like the descriptions of the little greys. Now, there's a bigger philosophical question there. Are aliens cryptid? Let me know about that in the comments below. And if you like hearing stories about cryptids and aliens, well, I have some great news, my friend. We got loads of cryptid videos on the channel, so get comfy, click through the playlists, and stay subscribed for something new every day. Number 4, Goatman. Up next on our list of cryptids that'll keep you from sleeping is Maryland's own Goatman. Now, he might look like Mr. Tumnus, but he isn't going to take you to Narnia anytime soon, and there'll be no Turkish delight in your future. Appearing as a half-human, satiric hybrid, the Goatman is thought to roam around Maryland, but he's been sighted in Louisiana and Texas as well. You know, perhaps he gets bored, perhaps he was taking a tour. The Goatman is said to carry a hatchet with him, and not for hacking any lumber. He's been said to be responsible for missing animals around the wooded areas in Maryland. Now, there's a pretty good historical precedent for goats involved in mythology, with satyrs as a mythical historical cryptid, and goats have been associated with Satan and demons for generations. But the Goatman himself has got a pretty rich history in Maryland folklore. Depending on who you ask, he's either just a cryptid goat man who wanders the woods, or if that's not satisfying enough for you, one particularly colorful origin for the goat man is that it's the product of a mad scientist's experiment who was experimenting with goats, and when it went astray, the goat man broke loose and started attacking passersby with an axe. I really like this one, and I choose to believe it's 100% factual. The goat man is a pretty popular folk story with teenagers, with urban legends describing the beast hunting down those who are looking to spend a little quality time at Lover's Lane. It's said he'll come and bleat ya. Bleat, like beat. It's a goat pun. It was pretty bad. Do goats do that, or is this sheep? I'm not sure. You know what? I shouldn't be practicing here. We're gonna move on from this. The Goatman still hasn't been seen as much in recent years, and I sincerely hope that he's still out there. Number 3, Qualpalic. The Qualpalic, or the Qualipiluit, is an indigenous cryptid, with most stories emanating from Nunavut, Canada, and Alaska in the United States. The Qualpalic is described as appearing vaguely humanoid, but having scaly and bumpy skin, and long, stringy, disgusting black hair. They are described as being disgustingly ugly and that they reek of sulfur, and I think it's worth noting that you cannot find a single artist's depiction of these things that don't make them just look like vomitatiously gross. Interestingly, the creature is predominantly described as being a female monster, although some local variations of the stories exist where it is described as a male creature, but most tales revolving it describe it as a lady monster. The Qualpalic is a bit of an icy boogeyman, snatching up children who misbehave, waiting around thin ice to crack up and drag those children down into freezing cold water. It's thought that the origin of this creature was first told as a story for practical purposes, as a pretty good way to get kids to not walk on thin ice is to tell them that they'll be grabbed by a gross ice demon. Allegedly, when they grab a child, they stuff them inside their leather burlap sacks, then scurry back downwards into the water. It's said that you can hear a knocking under the ice as a last warning that they're about to strike. Now, maybe this is just a personal experience I had, and maybe some of you also had this as a little kid, but I was read a children's book called A Promise is a Promise, a Robert Munsch classic, that featured a Qualpalic as a villain that was trying to get a little girl to bring her younger siblings to the Qualpalic as a little snack, and it terrified me so much. I didn't even live anywhere near thin ice, and I was scared about it. It scared me bad. Wiry black hair and sunken little eyes got me. Maybe it's not relatable at all, but but I thought I would share that. I definitely didn't spend any time near thin ice afterwards. Number 2, the Jersey Devil. The Jersey Devil is a fairly popular cryptid and has been subject to all sorts of sightings and stories since the early 1700s. And I bet you can't guess where it usually shows up. That's right. California. Nope, New Jersey. The Jersey Devil is commonly described as manifesting itself as a chimeric creature with a horse's head, bat wings, a snake-like tail, and hooves. There's an interesting folktale that says that the Jersey Devil was brought into our world when a woman was stressed out over her 13th pregnancy. Good lord, yeah, I would be too at my 13th pregnancy. Okay. She was nervous because apparently this pregnancy felt different, and I guess if she had 12 others, she'd really know. She said that she felt like the baby that was inside her was the devil. When she was ready to deliver her little newborn, instead of a happy little baby, the Jersey Devil was born, flew out into the night, and then spent the next 250 years terrorizing the New Jersey swampland. The creature is deeply rooted in local folklore, and to be honest, it's kind of beloved around Jersey. It serves as the name for the New Jersey Devils, and it worms its way into all sorts of pop culture, games, movies, TV, music. They love them over there. For years, there have been stories and sightings around New Jersey describing a kangaroo-like creature with glowing red eyes hunting on small animals in the surrounding areas, and lots of blurry photos of bizarre hybrid-looking creatures running around the countryside. There have even been hunts and bounties posted for the Jersey Devil with rewards for its capture. So is the Jersey Devil real, or just a beloved local legend? Number 1, the Hat Man. Rounding off our list is our most recent cryptid on this list, and a piece of modern folklore that is already making a lasting legacy. The Hat Man is a shadow person, or at least thought to be. Everyone who's seen the Hat Man has described almost the same thing exactly, most concerningly. A spindly, shadowy figure that appears to be wearing a hat. Sometimes a fedora, sometimes a top hat, but everyone describes him as wearing an old, out-of-date style, so you're not going to see him in a shadowy snapback anytime soon. He always appears fairly towering, and you can't see his face. It's obscured, or just not present, and the only thing you're truly able to make out are his pinprick red eyes poking out of the shadows watching you. Depending on who you ask based on the sightings, the Hat Man can be considered somewhat benign. Maybe. It's usually reported that the Hat Man appears to people who are suffering from sleep paralysis or insomnia, and most claims of Hat Man describe him as just watching, observing, studying, or whatever. I honestly don't know if that's better than it attacking you. However, it's not all just stories of nighttime stalking. There are some who claim that when they've been visited by the Hat Man, that he's jumped them or choked them, or they've felt burning sensations on their scalps or their chest. Although some say he's just watching you for I don't want to know why. There are many who believe that he feeds off your negative emotions, and perhaps this is how he satiates himself. It's said that people who are visited by Hat Man are those who are already struggling with something emotionally resonating. Sometimes people in the same family even report seeing the Hat Man in similar occurrences, so does he target specific groups of people? Or is it just certain emotions he hungers for? The Hat Man is shrouded in mystery, and even just thinking about him is enough to make my hair stand on end and start eyeing the coat rack in my room just a little suspiciously when I turn the lights off. Number 5, Menangle. Starting off of our list of horrifying cryptids that would have the devil checking underneath his bed is the Menangle, a demonic vampire spirit of the Philippines. Now, there is a good chance that I am horribly mispronouncing that name. My Tagalog ain't quite what it used to be. Just being a big vampire creature would be enough to earn a spot on this list, but the Menangle doesn't settle for just the bare minimum. Oh, no. This creep turns it up all the way. Listen to me describe this monster and tell me that it wouldn't be out of place in Elden Ring attacking you in the horrible wastes of Caelid. The Menangle is a humanoid bat creature hybrid. And a quick aside, while I was doing some research for this video, I found it really interesting that nearly every culture has their own variation of a humanoid bat cryptid. There's the Ahul in Indonesia, Kangamato in some African regions, and Bruce Wayne in North America. The Menangle has giant leathery bat wings, which it uses to sweep through the night, grabbing its prey and fleeing off. And we haven't even started talking about the Menangle's namesake and action feature. Its name comes from the Tagalog word tangle, which means to separate, with its full name roughly translating to one who separates itself. Well, whatever does that mean? Well, it's because this nightmare creature can split itself in half, taking to the skies as a disembodied torso with flapping bat wings screeching around. Can you even imagine how soul-stoppingly scary it would be to see a giant bat monster flying around with like its entrails just hanging out for everybody to see, hanging loose like an old man in a gym shower? Its favorite prey is couples, young newlyweds in love, and also people who are sleeping. No respect from this thing. You shouldn't attack sleeping lovers. If you're hearing this and you're locking your doors, a Menangle is said to be thwarted by garlic. Now garlic will thwart it, but not slay it. I'm just glad I eat so much garlic and I'm very repugnant and I'm gonna be alone for the rest of my life, so I have no danger of Menangles. Now, if you want loads more cryptid content, we have got enough to fill up a zoo worth of the creepiest critters ever to crawl through the woods. Not your jam? We got aliens, monsters, movies, true crime, fake crime, and a lot of videos about a big shark. There's a little something to scare everybody. So hit that bell, stay subscribed, and stay scared. And please stay watching this video. I worked hard finding all these cryptids for you. Number 4. Jotagumo. One of you delightful little ghouls in a previous video left a comment suggesting this one for me, and I thank you so much for putting me on the trail of this cryptid. I wouldn't have heard about it before, so shout out to the Phantom Spectator for this one. The Jotagumo is a monster of Japanese folklore that's kind of like a succubus, but with a bit more of an arachnid twist. I can't say the name of what Jotagumo translates to and stay within YouTube guidelines, but just know that it is extremely funny. I will give you a hint. Oldest profession spider. Ask your parents. Jotagumo is considered a yokai, basically a Japanese demon. It's a powerful shapeshifter, maintaining the form of a beautiful young woman to seduce its prey and able to transform into a vicious spider to finish the job off. What's she like to eat? Well, she has more acquired tastes than flies and grasshoppers. The Jotagumo likes young, handsome men who are lonely and looking for love. When in her humanoid form, she'll seduce them, invite them back to her lair, and well, you can probably guess how it goes. The folklore behind Jotagumo is fascinating. In Edo period Japan, spiders were considered to be mythical creatures with alien abilities, which, I mean, come on, totally reasonable. And it was said that the older a spider gets, the more powerful and potent its abilities would become, kind of like a wizard. A Jotagumo is a spider that's lived for hundreds of years to be able to shapeshift, and she doesn't even look a day over 25, not bad. An old folktale tells the story of a woodcutter who fell in love with a woman he met at a waterfall. He visited her every day but grew weaker with each visit. A priest accompanied him one day, and when a spider thread reached out to the woodcutter, the priest yelled, warning the woodcutter that the woman he loved was a dreaded Jotagumo. Already ensnared by her spell, he persisted and ran towards the waterfall, where he was entangled in the web and never seen again. Number 3. The Beast of Exmoor. Whoa! With a name like the Beast of Exmoor, this thing's gotta be good, right? The Beast of Exmoor sounds like something you and a party of adventurers would set out to slay to restore peace and balance to Eternia. So what is the mighty Beast of Exmoor? Well, it's in Exmoor in the UK, which is a real place and not a fantasy castle, where it gets its name, and locals tell the story of a gigantic elusive cat. In the 80s, there were all sorts of stories and sightings of a massive cat being described as similar to a puma or a panther being spotted around the Exmoor area. A farmer around the area claimed that he had lost over 100 sheep in his care, and all of them lost in strange, unnervingly violent ways. Injuries that looked like a feral creature had mauled them. Skin peeled back, skulls crushed, throats cut. This grew the notoriety of the elusive creature, and where all these sightings come from. People would claim that they'd see this huge beast like a black leopard stalking the plains. In fact, it was theorized for a while that it was possible that the Beast of Exmoor was a cougar or another big cat that had been owned by some sort of exotic collector, not naming any particular reality TV big cat owners, that had either gotten loose or let out into the wild to roam free, wreaking absolute havoc on an otherwise sleepy countryside. The problem got so bad that the Daily Express, which admittedly is a gossip rag, offered a cash reward for anyone who could bring the body of the Beast of Exmoor. Unfortunately, Geralt of Rivia was preoccupied, so no one was able to take this deal up. In 2006, a Devon farmer noticed the bones of a puma on his estate, which is odd, as there are very few pumas roaming the British countryside. There's cougars, yes, there's a lot of cougars in Great Britain and the UK, but I wouldn't consider Catherine Zeta-Jones a threat. So was the bones found the remnants of the Beast of Exmoor, or does this elusive cryptid still stalk the night, attacking sheep? The frustrating thing about hunting a cat cryptid is there's no way it's gonna come when you call it. Best thing you can do is put out a big cardboard box and hope that it'll jump inside that, because it's a cat. Number 2, Goatman. Okay, some of these cryptids have been a little grounded, realistic animals that got loose or whatever. I'm over that. We need one on this list that's just completely out there in every regard, supernatural and wild. So let's discuss the nastiest kid in Maryland, the Goat Man. Now, he might look a bit like Mr. Tumnus, beloved childhood character, but he is not taking you anywhere as nice as Narnia anytime soon, and he sure as heck don't got no Turkish delight for you. He manifests as a half-human, half-goat, a satyr of sorts. His sightings and descriptions describe him as having a goat's head and the body of a man. The legend of the Goat Man started down in Maryland, and is primarily where most of his legends come from, but he's also been sighted around Louisiana and Texas as well. We love a goat man that's well traveled. Goats have been figures in myths and folklore for generations, with goats thought to be associated with Satan and demons, but the Goat Man himself is all Maryland. Depending on who's telling the story, he's just a supernatural entity that wanders the woods, or maybe he's a former goat farmer who became deranged after losing one too many goats and he's a madman in a costume. If that origin leaves a little bit to be desired, he's also got a fantastic comic book bad guy origin story where he's the product of a science experiment gone wrong to, I don't know, merge a man with a goat, I guess. Anyway, he breaks out of the lab Stranger Things style and creeps through the woods, hatchet in hand, attacking passersby dare disturb his territory with an axe. The Goat Man was a fairly popular campfire story and urban legend through the 70s and 80s amongst teenagers, where the creature was said to haunt Lover's Lane looking for canoodlers, where he'd split up the action with a sharp axe like he's Jason Voorhees with a set of horns. For any of my Maryland viewers, shout out for me. Is Goat Man still a big deal? Do the kids still tell stories about him? I love this guy, so I am curious. Number 1, the Hat Man. Now, a lot of these entries and stories and cryptids have been told for generations over and over, so I think it's only fitting that I get with the times a little bit and we start talking about a modern cryptid. The Hat Man is the most recently talked about cryptid on this list, if you can call it that. Is cryptid the right word for a shadow person? I don't know, but it's my list, and if anyone wants to correct me, the Hat Man is welcome to come down to the studio. Interestingly, almost everyone who reports seeing this mysterious Hat Man describes it almost exactly the same way. A spindly, tall, shadowy figure that is wearing a hat, hence the name. Some people see a top hat, some see an old, like, newsman's fedora. Everyone says his attire is out of date by a century or two, so no new era fitted on this guy. You can't see his face at all, just shadows, and the only thing you can make out are his dead, pinprick eyes, shining red in contrast to the darkness of the rest of his physique. And he is watching you. Now, what does the Hat Man do besides checking in on you at night? People who report seeing him appear to be people who are suffering from sleep paralysis or insomnia, and most sightings or reports describe him as being benign, if not terrifying. Watching you, studying you, what have you. There are some, however, who claim that he's not just a visitor and he's a little more sinister than that. Some people tell stories of getting an appearance from the Hat Man and feeling choked or burning sensations on their scalps or chest, or just feeling like a general overwhelming terror and nausea, which I think is totally reasonable if there was a shadow demon in the corner of my room watching me. Now, some people who've seen him claim that he feeds off your emotions, and that the people who are visited by the Hat Man are those who are already struggling with something like great stress or mental illness, which is probably definitely not made better by a shadow demon. Sometimes people in the same family claim that they can see him. So what's he doing? Is he targeting specific people, or is it certain emotions that he hungers about? Thinking about him already is enough to make my hair stand on end and squint at the coat rack in my room when I turn the lights off. I think I'm gonna sleep with just the lights on tonight, just to, like, be safe and make sure my cats don't bump into anything or anything. Number 5, Mothman. We had to start with a classic. He was either gonna be number 5 or number 1, and I figured we'd get him out of the way first. He's maybe one of the most universally recognized and classic cryptids out there. He's West Virginia's unofficial mascot, and he's as beloved as the Appalachians and buckwheat pancakes. You've probably heard of Mothman a bunch before, but do you know his backstory? You know where his legends and his legacies start? Unless you're a West Virginia native, maybe not, so let's shed some light on the Mothman, because he would probably love that. You know, he's a moth, he's drawn to it. Most Mothman fans agree that his first reported sighting was in the 1960s, 1966 to be exact. The story goes that a young couple, one Roger and Linda Scarberry, had been driving around at night when they saw a large creature whose eyes were glowing red, standing at the side of the road near the site of an old World War II munitions plant. Linda described this being as being 7 foot tall, muscular, with giant wings and nightmarish glowing red eyes. Upon being illuminated, the creature pursued them all the way to Point Pleasant. Now, one isolated sighting does not make a cryptid legend, so it was probably the repeated sightings that propelled our favorite moth into legend status. For the next few weeks, Virginians kept reporting sightings of a bizarre, large bird-like creature with glowing red eyes. On December 15th, 1967, the Silver Bridge in West Virginia collapsed, with several locals conspiring that the Mothman was involved and could be seen flying away from the crime scene. I always thought he was benevolent, just like a fun, I don't know, guy. I didn't know he did stuff like that. This is unwelcome news. Maybe it's just because we all like the idea of him so much. He does look weirdly cuddly, but Mothman is an absolutely beloved figure to West Virginia and cryptid fans all over. He's kind of larger than life, and it's easy to forget that the first initial sightings and reports of him was that he was a paranormal threat intent on harming humans, considering just how adorable he is now. He's got movies, stuffed toys, and even a festival in his hometown dedicated to celebrating our favorite freak. And if you're looking for more stories of freaks of nature, or the nature of freaks, stories too good to be true and stories too true to be good, well, we've got all of that and then some on Top 5 Scary. Click through, I guarantee you'll find something you like, and then subscribe and stay scared if you do. But hey, keep watching this video first, because we got way more cryptids to get through before we hit the credits. Let's keep going. Number 4, the Rougarou. Oh, that is so fun to say. Say that at home with me around. Rougarou. Oh, rolls off the tongue. Our next entry takes us deep into the swamps of Louisiana. Deep beneath the brush of the bayou, amidst all the flies, crawfish, toads, and gators, lies something sinister in the sunshiny Pelican State. Alright, I'll knock that off. I won't do that for the rest of the video. I won't torture you. The Rougarou is a centuries-old cryptid, a more Cajun answer to the werewolf. The name Rougarou actually is a direct link from the French word for werewolf, loup-garou, shifting over time. If you L to an R if you can hear it there, I don't know. My accent's not great. The history of the Rougarou can vary greatly, with differing legends and conflicting fables telling different stories of the beast's origins or motives, but it can all be traced all the way back to medieval France. Back in those days, a lot could go wrong. Lost crops, your livestock goes missing, your children go missing, your house burns down, all your investments in cryptocurrency go up in smoke, and all your apes get stolen. Any number of terrible things could happen to a French medieval peasant. And when that would happen, instead of cursing out or lashing out at the sky, you would blame the Rougarou for your troubles. It's very easy to pin all your problems on an imaginary werewolf. I do that all the time. I stub my toe, I curse out a werewolf. Villages would capture people who they believed to be acting strangely, or even sometimes just somebody who lived out in the woods, and pin all the blame on the village's problems on them for being a werewolf. So unfair, the discrimination werewolves receive. This tradition of blaming an invisible werewolf for your problems led to the Rougarou becoming a fixture in legends passed down from French Catholics, mostly about behaving. Stories would be told of how if you didn't behave, you didn't follow your parents' rules, the Rougarou would come and he'd snatch you from your bed in the middle of the night and carry you off in the woods. Or sometimes he's like a very Catholic monster. If you didn't adhere to the rules of Lent every year, your sinful ways would see you transforming into a Rougarou. So it's a Catholic werewolf born out of naughty behavior instead of being bit by one. How exactly someone like transforms into a Rougarou is not made super clear, like if it only happens on full moons or if it's a one and done kind of thing and then you're a furry for life. All that's known is that the Rougarou is a deadly creature of the night, stalking the swamps, giving pause to travelers who dare explore the bayou late at night. But hey, so long as you mind your P's and Q's and you promise to give up whatever you said you would for Lent, you and the Rougarou should be headed in different directions. Hopefully. Number 3, skinwalkers. This one is a very popular cryptid online, and you've probably heard a great deal about them before if you're a fan of this kind of thing. But the term does kind of get thrown around a lot and ends up describing all sorts of things that might not be super accurate. So let's take a look at examining some of the history of the legend and where it stems from. Skinwalkers are apparently like really viral on TikTok. I wouldn't know, I gotta be honest, I try to really limit how much time I'm on that. The skinwalker is a creature of Navajo legend where it's referred to as a Yi-Naldushi, and please forgive me if that's pronounced incorrectly. It translates to, by means of it, it goes on all fours, referring to their tendency to walk like an animal. Navajo witches and skinwalkers go against traditional Navajo values and are seen as the antithesis of their core beliefs. As well, it's worth adding, legends of skinwalkers and Navajo witches are not particularly well known or well told outside of indigenous communities, and some indigenous advocates and groups are not the biggest fan of their folklore and cultural history being made into fodder for ghost stories. Animals commonly associated with skinwalkers are coyotes, wolves, foxes, eagles, owls, or crows, but skinwalkers are said to be able to have the power to assume the form of any animal they see fit. Now, a variation of the legend surrounding the creature is that they're able to extend this ability to taking the face of a human victim, which is extremely scary. Some legends say that skinwalkers gain power from a victim's fear and that they prey on those who are afraid. And some state that looking into the eyes of one will cause your body to seize up, overtaken by the fear, where it will then attack you. On TikTok, as I've come to understand from some very intensive research and definitely not just goofing off at my desk watching TikToks of cats falling down on my phone, is that skinwalkers are popularly thought to be a creature imitating humans or animals and doing a poor job of it. Which case, if that is true, the likelihood of me being a skinwalker? Sky high. Number 2, Mongolian deathworm. Our next entry is a cryptid whose name really says it all. If you ever hear something get described as a Mongolian deathworm, you have to figure that is probably not the friendliest form of life out there. For starters, it sounds like it would be way more at home in the dunes of Arrakis than it would be on our Earth. That one's for my Frank Herbert heads out there. The creature is also called Ogoi Korkoi, which translates to large intestine worm, which is, that's just lovely. Appetizing. It allegedly lives in the Gobi Desert, has been evading hunters since the 20s when it first rose to prominence. A paleontologist and author going by the name of Roy Chapman Andrew recounted a story he'd heard at a gathering with several Mongolian officials, where they all talked of the worm at great length. Now, no one among them could claim to have actually seen it, but everyone firmly believed in its existence. In this book, he describes the worm as being about 2 feet long, with no head or limbs to speak of, and has such poisonous skin that direct contact is enough to have you buying the farm. It's described as well as having a sprayable venom and an electric discharge. You should probably see a doctor for that. It burrows underground, only coming up to the surface to hunt and eat, presumably. In 1990, Czechoslovakian cryptozoologist, and wow, that's a mouthful, Ivan Macro led a team to try and find the creature in the Gobi Desert. This I love so much because Dune is my favorite book. They used the same technique that the Fremen of Arrakis used to try and find these worms that the Fremen used to deal with the sandworms. They used a rhythmic thumping made from a motor-driven thumper to try and summon the creature out of possible hiding spots. They never found the fabled worm, and that's because they weren't taking spice, so they couldn't see properly. So either it was just a dream, or the thing is very, very good at hiding. And I think with a little work, that could make a fun expression. Oh, it's as hard as trying to find a worm in a desert. We'll workshop it. Number 1, Gashadokuro. And our final entry is gonna come from Japan, and as a fabled mythological creature, and may I just say, is one of my favorite mythical monsters I've read about in a while. As soon as I was reading about this thing, I started texting my friends. I was so excited about it. This thing is a real-life Dark Souls boss fight. Maybe I'm outing myself as way too much of a nerd here, but this thing is where the inspiration for High Lord Wolnir and Grave Lord Nito of Dark Souls fame came from. I couldn't resist throwing it out there. Sorry, guys. Formed from tens of thousands of bones of fallen soldiers, the Gashadokuro is a massive titan of a beast, a gigantic skyscraper-sized skeleton. Is that not the coolest thing you've ever heard? A giant which wanders around the countryside during the darkest hours of the night. Their teeth chatter and their bones rattle, which is why the translation for their name translates loosely to rattling skull. You'd have to imagine though, you would probably hear this thing chattering its teeth from a few hundred miles away. You'd hear it in the next town over. It's said that the Gashadokuro is born when mass amounts of soldiers die on the same battlefield. Their bodies rot in the fields and they don't receive proper funerary rites. As such, their souls are filled with torment as their bodies lay face down in the muck, and that malice permeates their bones, causing them to twist and mend into unnatural ways, clumping together to eventually form the humongous skeletal monster of a boss fight, the Gashadokuro. Now, troublesome for humans, it's said that a Gashadokuro is too large and too powerful to be felled by ordinary weapons. Although, I have to wonder if that's still true. I feel like we put more gunpowder in things in 2023 than they did in the Sengoku period, and I'm pretty sure a bulldozer would make short work of a bunch of bones being held together with hatred. It's said that these creatures no longer show up because the amount of dead bodies in one place are not nearly as high as they once were in rural areas of Japan back then, with significantly less wars and plagues occurring, which is a sign of progress, right? You know, if there's so few piles of mass graves that they're no longer reanimating as Godzilla-sized skeleton demons, that that's a real positive note for the human race, and I think something we can all smile about. Number 5, weird deer. Coming up first today on our list of strange sightings is going to be this first clip, which was lovingly uploaded to TikTok with the caption, WTF deer. Now, of course, we all know what that means, but if you're not familiar with internet acronyms, WTF stands for, well, that's fantastic. And when you see the condition this deer is in, you'll probably say WTF too. In the clip, we can see a deer getting the heck out of Dodge, scampering out of the woods like somebody just flatlined Bambi's mom. It looks frightened, as if it knows something is up. Well, not even a few seconds after we're introduced to our deer, whatever has this deer so scared that it's causing to freeze up like a deer in headlights, a second deer comes running out with a head that's twisted every wrong way. The thing is checking its rear views while also looking forward. The snarled deer then charges forward into the night, hopefully to never be seen again. Now, when this was uploaded, the intent was that this was a skinwalker caught on camera. Skinwalkers, of course, being Dene or Navajo shamans who have been cast out of society for their practice of black magic and unsavory communion with spirits. They're outcasts from society, exiles. And they're traditionally said to be able to take the form of animals if they wish. They're considered witches, not cryptids. And it should be stated too that indigenous people don't particularly enjoy these stories being repackaged. Now, in this clip, it seems to me like this is a deer with a bad neck injury, or maybe a manufacturing defect of some kind, struggling to survive. Now, while anything on this big blue marble is possible, to me it's more likely this is just a deer who's probably in extreme pain than it is a shape-shifting witch. Personally, if I could shapeshift, I would shapeshift into a deer that had a regular neck. You let me know what you'd shapeshift into. And if you're looking for more footage of shape-shifting animals, creepy crawlers, ghouls and goblins, ghosts, conspiracies, true crime, fake crime, and a whole lot more, Top 5 Scary has all of that and then some. Seriously, if you can think it up, we've got a video or two on it. So click on through, hit subscribe, please make sure to hit that little bell so you don't miss anything, but if you do me a favor, do that at the end of this video, because I got 4 more weird things found in the woods coming up for you right now. Number 4, friendly neighbor. Our next clip is one that maybe you've seen before if you're like me and spend the days trolling the web for supernatural content, as it's a pretty freaky one. Now, there's some skepticism all around this script, you know? I'm naturally a bit of a skeptic. I'm more of a Scully than a Mulder. But this next clip is pure weird. We can see someone or something crawling around in the woods. Now, it looks human, but isn't that the whole point, to look deceptively human? Well, whatever this humanoid is, we get an up-close and personal look at this thing crawling in an extremely comfortable way that doesn't look human. Humanoid moves like a zombie, moving like a puppet with tangled strings. Now, I would think a shapeshifter, if they got caught by someone, would transform into a wolf or a cougar or maybe a hawk and get on out of there, right? And maybe we're catching this creature at a bad time, mid-transformation, as we see the humanoid attempt to build up a bit of momentum by getting down on all fours and trying to accelerate forward. Now, I do feel like I have to address the elephant in the room here. I don't want to talk down to you or play ignorant. Now, this could be a shape-shifting witch of legend, but we should also address the very real possibility that this clip of someone shirtless walking around on all fours behaving extremely odd in what looks to be a backwoods part of Virginia, maybe. This could very easily be someone on substances, or all of the substances, entirely possible by the way that little walk is going. This looks like there is a cocktail of things going on in that head right now. Whether or not this is a supernatural threat or a chemical one, we might not know, but I think we can all agree, completely horrifying, and I would prefer to never have to interact with that person. Number 3, that ain't no book. And coming in right at our sweet little middle spot, here's a clip that I didn't think was the best, but I also didn't think was the worst. It's a perfectly neutral clip, perfect middle child of a clip. In this very short clip, we see someone driving through the backwoods late at night, real children of the corn kind of situation. Nothing but big stalks for miles and miles around, which is perfect actually, all the better for creatures of the night to stalk you in. That pun was a bit laborious, but we got there. In the clip, it seems like the driver notices a buck acting a bit strangely, until the camera zooms in ever so slightly, and you realize immediately, just like the title said, that ain't no buck. We see a bizarre creature on its hind legs running far, far away from the person filming, which I'm sure the person filming wasn't upset about at all. Now, this creature looks the most like what I think people imagine a skinwalker looks like when they imagine it. Some wretched mix of flesh and animal skin running through the night hunting for prey. I'm actually not sure what this could be. I mean, it could be somebody again on some substances running through the woods late at night. A lot of these I've always got a possibility for what these creatures could be. I like to think I have a reasonable explanation for everything, but this, I don't know. All I can tell you for sure is that ain't no buck. It's an unexplained sighting caught on camera, after all. You want me to try and explain the unexplained? That's the whole purpose of it. They're unexplained. You simply can't explain them. Number 2, the corvid. Coming up next on our list of strange sightings of shape-shifting shamans is this video uploaded to TikTok of a raven that's got people saying, "No more!" Like nevermore, quoth the raven, Edgar Allan Poe. I don't know. Sometimes I'm struggling for jokes. It was uploaded to TikTok by user Lindsay Ivan, and I don't know, something about her, she seems familiar, like I've heard her name before. Anyway, in the video, we get an up-close and beautiful personal view of a beautiful raven with a very unnerving voice. It sounds as if it's got the voice of a human. Now, skinwalkers are said to be shape-shifting witches who can take the form of any animal they please and can mimic many voices. So is that what's happening here? Is that what this footage is? You sure that's why? Well, this next video I wanted to include solely because I wanted to debunk it, 1, and 2, take it as a small window of education for something I am very passionate about. Ravens are corvids, birds that are known for having hooked beaks and bristly feathers. They're usually black, although the blue jay is a very famous notable exception. Crows, ravens, magpies, jackdaws, jays, these are all corvids. Now, what makes corvids so interesting and one of my favorite kind of birds out there ever is they are unbelievably intelligent, with many ornithologists suggesting that ravens and crows, not only the smartest birds on the planet, but very well maybe like top 5 smartest animals out there. Among crows and ravens' many parlor tricks is that they're able to remember human faces. They understand the concept of causality. A raven understands what cause and effect is. Ravens can count, they've been shown making tools, they give gifts, they solve puzzles, and they can mimic sounds they hear with alarming clarity like a parrot. Everyone thinks of a parrot as a bird that can talk, but a crow and a raven can do it as well. So this beautiful bird in this clip is showing off his vocal range by mimicking human speech that he'd heard in a wondrous display of intellect from one of nature's most staggeringly impressive creatures. Or, of course, it could be a shape-shifting warlock of Dene legend that is grossly misattributed to almost every single random encounter on TikTok because the name sounds cool and people don't research things. Could be either one. Number 1, a scream in the woods. Coming up in the final spot today in our list of possible shapeshifters we just can't explain on camera is this viral video that's been making the rounds for its unexplained and terrifying nature. Now, this clip was originally uploaded under the name Strange Sounds While Mushroom Hunting. That sounds lovely. By user Tomorrow's Garden. Clicking through on the channel, we can see that they mostly stick to naturalist content, and when they're not doing that, they're reviewing the exciting world of stud finders and mouse traps. So supernatural hoaxes doesn't really seem to be a big part of their channel's identity, which is what makes this clip that much more real. In the clip, we see someone walking around a beautiful little forest as the user is checking out what's new with the local mycelium. Interrupting the bird song and the other beautiful sounds of the forest is a shrill scream that seems like it's come directly from hell, piercing not just your ears but your soul. Downright agonizing. Let's roll a clip of just that shrill shrieking. Pretty scary, right? Sounds like something that has crawled its way out of the depths of the pits of Tartarus and is deeply upset about it. Now, what unnerves me is how much you can maybe this doesn't make sense, hear a human scream inside the animal scream, if you follow me. The best part of this video though is that after the scream peters out, realizing that he's probably now hanging around somewhere where some sort of horrific flesh beast is lingering, he announces to himself very quietly, "I think it's time to go now." He says it so quietly and normally, it's hilarious. Unlike every horror movie guy ever, he just calmly decides to get out, and that's why he survived to upload this video, and Tomorrow's Garden, we thank you for. Number 5, some strange noises. One of the creature's signature calling cards is said to be its horrific wails, its pained shrieks that don't sound like any animal you'd recognize. It's also said that it's been able to imitate human voices to better lure out its prey. And perhaps those disconcerting sounds were caught on tape as recently as 2019, when a series of howls and shrieks left a hunter and a government biologist scientist searching for answers as to what was going on in those woods. Gino Mekas was hunting with his wife and grandson in northwest Ontario in a fairly remote rural area, about 50 kilometers away from the nearest sign of civilization, most likely an en route. Sorry, rest of the world, that joke is just for Ontario. It's a Canadian cryptid, what can I say? At first, I thought it was a moose, but my mind changed when it screamed again and again. Mekas is an avid hunter, a resident of Sioux Lookout, and knows his way around the woods and what creatures should be living in it. He added on saying, "I've heard many different animals in the wild, but nothing like this. I grew up hunting with my grandfather for the first 12 years of my life. The howls initially came from the distance, but soon appeared closer." We've got the clip, so why don't you take a listen for yourself and see what you think. Now, some speculated that it could be a grizzly bear. However, there's not a lot of evidence for that since grizzlies don't really live in these surrounding areas. They are known to roam, but there's not reports of grizzly bears nearby. Others speculated that it could be a wolf, which definitely is possible, but you would think that an expert seasoned hunter would recognize a wolf. So, there's a number of people who speculate that this could be the mythical Wendigo caught on tape. And if you're looking for way more stories of folklore, creatures, cryptids, well, you already know what channel I'm going to recommend. It's the one you're watching right now. We've got tons and tons of scary lists just waiting for you to discover. So hit that subscribe button. Please make sure to hit that bell so you don't miss a single scream and get all caught up. But do that at the end of this video if you wouldn't mind. I got way more Wendigo sightings coming up for you. Number 4, Southern Ontario sighting. Our next story also comes to us from my home province of Ontario. Makes a lot of sense. It's where a number of regional myths revolving around the Wendigo all originally stem from. Now this one comes to us from an anonymous Redditor who posted to the Skinwalkers subreddit detailing a strange encounter that they had, possibly with the creature. You take a listen to this. "I decided to take my dog out for a walk this afternoon and not put my headphones in. As we were walking along, I heard a voice calling out my name in a sing-songy way. I stopped and looked around and I called for my dog to come back to me, and he stopped where he was and stared at me for a while and then eventually came to me. I didn't acknowledge it. I walked around a little more and still didn't see anything. Now, I live with my parents, and my mom knows that stories about skinwalkers freak me out. A few days ago, we were having a bonfire, and she hid and tried to call for me in a scary voice to freak me out, so I assumed this was the same thing happening. I continued walking and I heard, 'Come over here,' and I was so freaked out because this sounded like it was my voice saying it, and I heard this so much more clearly, like it was coming from inside my head. I have no idea what was out there this afternoon, but I can tell you for certain I will never walk out there without my headphones on again. Can honestly say this was the weirdest experience of my life." Now, if you believe the legends and folklore, if you hear the creature calling out for you, the only correct thing to do is to ignore its attempts to lure you away. You don't want to go toe to toe with this thing. You're not going to stand a chance. So it sounds like the original poster in this situation, even though they were scared out of their wits, still made the right decision and got off with just a scare and a story instead of something much, much worse. Number 3, the man in my scope. This next story comes to us from an interview that a YouTuber, Funkalopagus, did with a hunter who thinks he had an encounter with the creature or something else deeply strange late at night. He originally posted this story to Reddit with the name Perpetual Connection, so that's what we'll call him if it comes up. He says he was hunting boar. He was saving up for a while to get a special thermal vision scope. He took it to a range and waited from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. to find a good boar to bag, but surprisingly wasn't finding anything. And he noted that the area that he went up to was shockingly empty of wildlife, no deer, no rabbits, no coyotes, nothing, as opposed to it usually being pretty plentiful. So he was getting himself ready to leave, assuming it must have just been a bad day, when he heard a crunch come from the direction that he'd entered the park. So he raised his scope to see what it was and saw initially what he assumed was a bear, some big mass on his scope. He zoomed in a bit and jolted when he realized it wasn't a bear, but looked a bit more like a man. Now what was disturbing him was that he was about 30 miles away from any other public areas. And there were no other cars parked around, no wildlife to speak of. The only other living thing next to him was this person in his scope, who happened to be completely naked, twitching and grabbing at all the foliage. The OP then says that the mysterious figure looked up at him and in an extremely unsettling, high-pitched feminine voice began to call out for help. The hunter believed that he was being trapped and scrambled to escape. He said it didn't sound like this voice should be coming from this entity, and he said that the creature was staring at him with a wide smile and unfurled itself standing on its back legs, standing 6 feet tall or maybe more. He pointed his weapon at the unknown entity and warned for it to stand down, and said that it arched on its fours again and hissed at him like a cat before disappearing into the brush, screeching in wail. The hunter would return to his car and drive off in an absolute panic, I think like most of us would, and he would tell authorities what he saw, but he was only reprimanded for hunting at night. I mean, fair enough. If I reported that story to the sheriff or something, I think I as the sheriff would hear that and just, scratch that off, be like, oh, I'm not messing with that. So what do you think? Did he happen to come across someone in the woods who was just having a wild night on all of the substances, or was that a close encounter with death that he narrowly avoided? Number 2, the 2019 sighting. This next sighting happened in 2019. It's the same time as the first point. Coincidence? Absolutely, but worth mentioning nonetheless. This next story was posted to Reddit by a user named Bradley Innovates. Bradley tells about how he had just been discharged, honorably, don't worry, from the Marines and was returning home to his home state of Alabama. Sweet home Alabama, and was catching up visiting on old friends. His best friend Jacob in particular, the two of them had been friends their whole life and usually got up to, boyhood stuff, hanging out in the woods, that kind of thing. The two of them traveled out to a secluded campsite that they'd enjoyed when they were younger, bringing a long arm with them for target practice. The two were chatting and eventually got onto stories of cryptids in the woods, namely, you guessed it, the Wendigo. His friend told him one could summon this creature by speaking its name 3 times into the woods like Bloody Mary. I've said its name like 9 times in this video. I'm speaking into a camera, so I hope that's okay. I hope I'm not cursing you out there. Might be best just to sage your house a little bit after watching this video. Anyway, Bradley played along and spoke his name out 3 times, only to discover nothing happened. Until he heard a snap in the woods, and his reflexes instinctively darted backwards. A few coyotes ran by, and his friend decided that it was enough scares for the woods and started to pack up when a tree began to fall forward towards them. Now, if that wasn't already unnerving, the Redditor said the next thing he heard was the voice of his friend's younger sister calling out to them both, except they didn't bring her along and she wasn't anywhere nearby, and that's when both of them knew they were in far deeper trouble than they thought. They claimed that they saw an emaciated, fleshy monster, deathly thin, with next to no meat on its bones, skin as pale as ash, and a vibrant blue eyes. That actually sounds pretty familiar, to be honest. The men fired at it and ran screaming from the woods towards their car. They escaped, horrified by what they saw, but luckily alive. If this story is true, then that has to be a real-life encounter with the creature. Number 1, Jack Fiddler. There truly aren't many sightings or stories of Wendigos, and indigenous people don't particularly like to share these stories out of their tribes. Despite the popularity on apps like TikTok, it's a pretty niche bit of folklore. Of course, it could also be because there are people out there maintaining the local population. Jack Fiddler, or Zanhano Gahengogawa, was an Ojibwe shaman living in Sandy Lake in the late 1800s, early 1900s. He was renowned among his people for being a hunter of the supernatural, defending his tribe from threats that no one else would be willing. There are many documented cases of indigenous people who, feeling themselves lose control to the appetite or the spirit within them, would request that someone close and trusted would be the one to finish them off. This could be a close friend of the family or a family member. It was an act of mutual trust. Zanhano Gahengogawa claims to have felled 14 Wendigos during his lifetime like this. Of course, not everyone would see it this way. By 1906, word would reach the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the Mounties, that to them there was this is a quote, a band of pagans in the habit of killing one another whenever one gets delirious through fever or other causes. By 1907, the mounted police had arrested Zanhano Gahengogawa and his brother Pescoquan for the death of Pescoquan's daughter-in-law. Locals in the tribe decried the decision, saying they didn't understand, and that the man they were accusing of being a killer was a quiet, dignified man who lived with a clear conscience. After 15 weeks of imprisonment, Zanhano Gahengogawa would escape from the police escort holding him. When they found him, he was lying on a rock with a sash tied in a knot around his neck. It was his way out of escaping persecution.